just have to wait.
Why you made it dark? Very seldom I look at myself.
Ready.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This morning we stopped at a certain place. I think you all remember. But I like to repeat this passage. Yatocha bhikkhave ariya savako evam kama pajanati evam kamanam nidhanam pajanati nidhana sambhavam pajanati evam kamanam vematata pajanati evam kamanam vipako pajanati evam kamanam nirodham pajanati evam kamanam nirodhagamini patipadam pajanati. So imang nibbedhikam brahmacharyam pajanati. Kama nirodham. Imang nibbedhikam brahmacharyam pajanati kama nirodham. When a bhikkhu, a noble disciple, thus understand it, I came to feeling it's all right. Understand the sensual pleasures, understand the nidana, the origin of sensual pleasures, and vematata, diversity of sensual pleasures, and the diversity of sensual pleasures, results of sensual pleasures, and cessation of sensual pleasures, and leading to the cessation of sensual pleasures. He understands this penetrative spiritual life to be the cessation of sensual pleasures. Now, brahmacharya, nibbedhikam brahmacharyam pajanati kama nirodham. How he understands this? He understands Noble Eightfold Path. Through the Noble Eightfold Path, he can, the one who practices, it can be monastic or lay person, whoever, although the Buddha addressed this to monks, if anybody practices this, this is penetrative spiritual life that ends sensual pleasures. Here brahmacharya is another name for Noble Eightfold Path. So the Noble Eightfold Path has various names. Middle Path, middle path, and Brahmacharya path, and Nibbedhika path, penetrative path, penetrative insight. This is called Brahmacharya path. Does that mean that if lay people practice Noble Eightfold Path, do they practice Brahmacharya? Somebody observing even 5 precepts can practice the Noble Eightfold Path. 5 precepts is the basic minimum precept. Lay person can practice the Noble Eightfold Path. When you remember the Noble Eightfold Path, there is no precept to abstain from sensual misconduct. Abrahmacharya Veramani is not in the Noble Eightfold Path. And yet, it is called Brahmacharya life, Brahmacharya path. Why is that? Because this path leads to the end of sensual pleasures. When one observes Brahmacharya, when one observes the Brahmacharya abstaining from sensual pleasures, that is an additional requirement to begin with. But when you practice Noble Eightfold Path, you definitely leads to that state of destroying desire. Why people want to observe the 7th precept in Uposatha Attanga Sila, 7th precept, is for them to begin with the training to attain this state, Brahmacharya life, Noble Eightfold Path. And then even if they don't observe it at the beginning, they end up in getting rid of their sensual desire. Without getting rid of sensual desires, nobody can attain higher stage of enlightenment. One can attain until Sakadagami state. When one attains the Anagami state, one definitely must overcome greed and desire, greed and hatred. That is why when Aritta, remember in Alagadhupa Sutta, Venerable Aritta, I call him still Venerable Aritta because he was a noble monk. So Venerable Aritta said, although the Buddha said there are certain rules, certain precepts, certain things that if they do, that is harmful for spiritual practice. And he said, still, if they do not abstain from them, still they can attain spiritual path. Whatever antarayika dhamma, dangerous dhamma, Buddha asked them to abstain from. Aritta said, even if they don't abstain from them, they can attain spiritual path. Why did he say that? He knew that even some lay people living lay life without observing the 7th precept or the Noble Eightfold Path, of the 8 monastic precepts, 7th is the abstaining from sensual misconduct, essential having a sexual relationship, Abrahmacharya Veramani. But people who observe the 5 precepts have attained even Sakadagami state, second level of enlightenment. For instance, one day when Ananda went to a dana at the house of Nibbedhika. And after that, Nibbedhika told Venerable Ananda, Venerable Sir, my father was Isidatta. My uncle, my father's brother is Purana. I think this name may be a little, I may be wrong with the name, but 2 names are correct. But one of them may be her father may be Purana. After her birth, Purana abstained from, Purana observed celibacy. Purana observed celibacy. And when he passed away, Buddha said that he attained the second level of enlightenment, Sakadagami stage. But my uncle, my father's brother, Isidatta, he did not give up sensual pleasures. He had full enjoyment of sensual pleasures. He was not celibate. But when he passed away, Buddha said he also attained the second level of enlightenment. So Nibbedhika asked Venerable Ananda, Venerable Ananda, I don't understand this. My father was observing celibacy. My uncle was not observing celibacy. But when they passed away, Buddha said both of them had attained second level of enlightenment. So, Buddha said, Ananda, there are 2 paths. One is the faith followers path, other is wisdom followers path. Saddhanusari and Panyanusari, or Dhammanusari. Saddhanusari. One whose predominant mental state is faith. Purana had faith. So he observed celibacy and attained the second level of enlightenment. Isn't that wisdom? He knew how to maintain the balance between the sensual pleasure and spiritual life. And therefore he attained the one's eternal state. Perhaps Venerable Aritta knew this. And therefore Aritta said, although the Buddha said certain things are dangerous, one should not follow, but they are not dangerous. And this is an example. So Buddha gave in Alagadrupa Sutta many similes of danger of sensual pleasures. And other monks tried to persuade him not to misrepresent the Buddha. Ma Bhagava Abbati Kati. Don't misrepresent the Buddha. Buddha did not say that. But Venerable Aritta never believed that until he was called by the Buddha and Buddha reprimanded him and explained the danger of sensual pleasures. What it means actually is you can go up to a certain level. But beyond that, you cannot go without following the Noble Eightfold Path in the highest level. To some extent, we can follow it. That may be the reason why Abramacharya is not mentioned in the Noble Eightfold Path. you can see right speech, right action, right livelihood. These three taken separately from the Noble Eightfold Path and have Ajiva Attamaka Sila, 8 lifetime precepts. But 8 lifetime precepts is not enough for somebody to attain Anagami and Arahanthood. And this Nibbedhika Pariyaya Sutta shows the way to attain full liberation. So, imang Nibbedhikang Brahmacharyang Pajanati Kama Nirodhang. Brahmacharyang Kama Nirodhang Pajanati. So, Noble Eightfold Path, even though there is no celibacy mentioned there, it implies that without abstaining from sensual pleasures, one cannot attain full enlightenment. Okay. So, Kama Bhikka Vetabba, Kama Nang Nidana Sambho Vetabbo, Kama Nang Vematata Vetabba, Kama Nang Vipako Vetabbo, Kama Nirodho Vetabbo, Kama Nirodhagamini Patipada Veditabbati iti yantang uttang itime paticha uttang. For this reason, what is said, this is sensual pleasure, the sensual pleasures, its origin and variation and results, ending, and the path leading to the end of sensual pleasure. And this is repeated for other 5 stages. The last is suffering. I think you remember the 6 stages: sensual pleasures, feelings, and perception, then asava. After asava is the last one is the suffering, dukkha. Now, let us go to the last one, because others are very easy, very simple. Cessation of last one is suffering. Let us go to that. When it is a suffering should be understood, the source and origin of suffering should be understood, the diversity of suffering should be understood, the results of suffering should be understood, and the cessation of suffering should be understood, the way leading to the cessation to be understood. Now, this last one is our, we must pay more attention to the last one. Now, birth is the suffering. So Buddha wanted to define and explain the first noble truth, as it is given in many other places, we all understand this: birth, old age, illness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, dejection, and anguish are suffering. This is the very purpose of practicing Noble Eightfold Path is to bring this suffering to an end. And then he gave a list: old age and so forth, sickness and death and so forth. This very common thing, everybody understands that. Now, next is not to get what one wants is suffering. Does that mean to get what one wants is not suffering? Not to get what one wants is suffering. We want certain things, if we don't get it, it's suffering. What do we want? The whole list is given in Mahasatipatthana Sutta. No. Jati dhammane bhikkhave sattanang evang ichcha uppajjati aho vatamayang na jati dhamma assama na cha vatano jating agaccheyati na kopanetang ichchaya pattabbam ayampi yampichang nalapati tampi dukkham. Okay. Being subject to birth, think or wish, may I not be born. But by so wishing, one cannot stop birth. One wishes not to be born, but one is born. Why? In spite of our wish not to be born, we will be born again and again. Some Christians say they were born again Christians. Buddhists say they are born again and again and again Buddhist. Why is that? Because the cause of rebirth still is embedded in us. The cause of rebirth is already, the seed of rebirth is already planted. We have sown the seed. What we sow, we will reap. The cause of rebirth is still with us. While the cause of rebirth is still in us, we cannot wish not to take rebirth again. What is the cause of rebirth? We all know: desire, craving. Craving, ignorance, and karma. These three things. Karma, what do you call? Kammang kettan, vijnanam, bija. Kammang kettan, vijnana bijam. What is that passage? Avidya, craving. Avidya, no, moisture. Ignorance is the moisture. Tanna is the moisture. I forgot that passage. we have ignorance, craving, and karma. So long as these three things are there, no matter how hard we think not to be reborn again, rebirth takes place. And therefore, not to get what one wants is one of them. But to get what we want also is suffering. So we are caught in these two tragedies. One tragedy is not to get what one wants. Other tragedy is to get what one wants. Because what we got that we want, still we have to maintain it, support it, sustain it, preserve it, hold on to it. And therefore there is no escape. Not to get what one wants is suffering, and to get what one wants is suffering. As I said yesterday, this morning, you get what you like, also you get at the same time what you don't like, along with the things that you like. Why is that? Because of our ignorance. Because of our ignorance. What is the ignorance? Not knowing Four Noble Truths. Not knowing dependent on origination. Not knowing impermanence. Not knowing extremes. Not knowing all these things is called ignorance. And therefore, putting suffering to an end, we have to understand the whole system of getting rid of suffering. Whole system is in the Noble Eightfold Path. Entire Noble Eightfold Path we have to follow. So, and what is the diversity of suffering? There is extreme suffering. This is very interesting to remember. Diversity of suffering. Extreme suffering, there is slight suffering, there is suffering that fades away slowly. There is suffering that fades away quickly. Four types of diversity. Four types. One is the extreme suffering. You can see extreme suffering among animals. In health, I think in health there is extreme suffering. You know, nobody likes to be born in hell. Nobody. But that's why we say karma, ignorance, and consciousness. Our karma is so powerful that at the moment of death, even the hell appears in our mind as a very beautiful place. We feel cold. Hellish fire, oh, beautiful. I like to have this warm, because I'm very cold now. So the mind creates cold in the mind for the mind to, for the desire to arouse to be born in hell, because that is warm. So that is the nature of karma. We don't like to be born as animals. But at the moment, what we have done all in the Kukkurivatika Sutta, I mentioned this morning, Kukkurivatika Sutta, Senya and Punna. Punna was observing cow govata, cow observance, behave like a cow. Senya was observing, behaving like a dog, Kukravatika. So both of them went to see the Buddha. So Punna, observing cow, behaving like a cow, asked the Buddha, Venerable Sir, my friend, that is Senya, is behaving like a dog. You know, he eats from the ground, he always goes to dirty place to sniff and sleep like a dog and so forth. So Buddha asked him, Venerable Sir, my friend is living like a dog. What would be his destination? After his death, what will happen to him? Buddha said, Punna, don't ask me that question. Punna asked that question second time. Second time, Buddha said, Punna, don't ask me that question. He asked him third time. The third time, Buddha said, Punna, since Senya is living like a dog, he conditions his mind. He conditions his mind to become a dog. Once you condition a mind to become a dog, what else can you expect of him after his death? He will be a dog. Then Senya began to cry. So Buddha said, that's what I told you. You're going to be a dog. You're going to be a dog. Then Senya asked the Buddha, Venerable Sir, my friend, Punna, is living like a cow, behaving like a cow. Buddha asked him also twice not to ask the same question. When he asked the third time, Buddha said, he will become a cow after death. Why is that? He prepared his mind, he conditions his mind to become a cow. So according to, that is why in this we see, Chetanaha Bhikkhave Kammang Vadami. We think, and thinking is one karma. Thinking itself is one karma. And putting thinking into action is another karma. Two karmas in one shot. You know, with one bird you kill two birds. One stone kill two birds. Thinking is one karma. Putting thinking into action is another karma. So, at the moment of death, when somebody has already prepared the mind to be born as a dog, at the moment of death, person sees the dog is such a dog's womb, female dog's womb, is such a beautiful, very pleasant, acceptable, agreeable, nice place. Boom. In the mind, dog's what you call womb. Cow also like that. However, when both senior cried, Punna did not cry. But finally, both of them gave up. Why senior cried? Buddha asked, why do you cry? You don't you like to become a dog? No, Venerable Sir. I cried because I have wasted my time. I should have come to see you and listen to Dhamma much earlier. Punna also said, Venerable Sir, I am sad not because I would be born as a cow, because cow was respected in India. But I wasted my time. And both of them followed the Buddha. One thing, those days, now these days, our practice, no ordinary practice is, we take 3 refuges at the beginning. We take 3 refuges at the beginning. In the Buddha's time, they took 3 refuges at the end, not at the beginning. Abhikandamo Gotama, Abhikandamo Bhogotam, Nikutitamo Kojeya, Patichanam Vivaresha, Mula Samangang Atikeya, Andakareva Telapachonandare Chakuma Rupana Dakinti, Ajitage Panpetang, Buddhan Saranang Gacchami, Dhamman Saranang Gacchami, Sangham Saranang Gacchami. The Dhamma you explained is such a wonderful, excellent. You taught the Dhamma. It's like something, a pot that has turned down, turn up, like that you taught the Dhamma. Like a pot that was turned down, you turn it up so that somebody can see what is inside. Ukujitenga nikkoje, patichananga vivareya. Something is hidden, you open the cover for people to see what was hidden. Andhakara or telapachosantara, just like lighting a lamp in the dark room for someone with good eyesight to see the object in the room. Mulasa maggangatikeya, just like telling somebody who is bewildered, confused on the road, you are like a person who showed the the path. Ajjatage Panapetang Buddhan Sarananga. From now onward, I take the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. This is called Aveccha Pasada. Aveccha Pasada, meaning, Aveccha means understanding. The word comes from the root with to know. Aveccha is understanding. Aveccha Pasada means the faith endowed with understanding. Faith endowed with understanding. That is, then after that it goes Achara Saddha. First is Saddha or faith gained with understanding. And then once you gain the faith with understanding, that faith is called unshakable faith. If the faith is a blind faith, it is subject to shake. It is shakeable. But when you gain the faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, with understanding, never can you change that faith. Therefore, it becomes Achala Saddha. In a commentary, there was a story, probably you might have heard it. I don't remember the name of the person, but he went to see, he listened to the Buddha's sermon once, and he attained stream entry. That happens to many people. And he went home. In the middle of the night, somebody knocked on the door. He opened the door. Buddha appeared. Oh, Venerable sir, please come in, please come in. Open the door. And he made him sit down. When he sat down, he said, Venerable sir, what can I do for you? Why did you come in this middle of the night? Then this Buddha said, well, you remember today I gave a sermon. In that sermon, I said that there is no permanent self. But after everybody left, I began to think about it. And I found there's a little self. Then this man said, get out, you are Mara. He chased the Buddha out of the house. That means even if Buddha appears to him and says something different from the previous statement, that means Buddha will never have a second thought. His every thought is well thought, well, what you call fraud thought. There is no addition, no subtraction, no comments. It's perfect. One who attains the stream entry, one who has this kind of faith, endowed with knowledge, that faith is unshakable, and therefore that one with that faith will never distrust the Buddha. That is why such a person will never go to another teacher. And therefore, until such time, our faith is shakable. And Punna and Senior gained such a deep conviction that the Buddha was perfect, perfectly enlightened, took 3 refuges. The 5 precepts is not the Buddhist precepts. 5 precepts were there even before Buddha came into action in Indian society. Taking 3 refuges is in the Buddha's teaching, in the Buddha's dispensation. And therefore, taking refuge should be done with this kind of understanding. Yoja buddhanja dhammanja sanghanja saranangato chattari ariya satyani samma panyaya pasati. See, Noble Eightfold Path, after taking refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha with knowledge and have unshakable faith, and then know the Four Noble and learn Four Noble Truth and Noble Eightfold Path. Four Noble Truth is Buddha's prerogative, by the prerogative is a word, is a noun. Prerogative is a noun, you all know that. Buddha's prerogative is Four Noble Truths. Buddha's very special privilege, right, is the Four Noble Truths. And Senya and Punna had such a deep faith in the Buddha. At that time, Buddha gave them the teaching of Four Noble Truths, Buddha's prerogative. Anyway, sorrow, lamentation. So, okay. Okay. The diversity of suffering. First is extreme suffering. I was going to talk about this. Extreme suffering is in health, animal kingdoms, and so on. And there is slight suffering. Slight suffering may have one who may be following Dhamma, practicing Dhamma, living in accordance with the Dhamma, still because of the person's previous karmic power still existing in him, then that person still has some suffering. It is very slight. It is not very heavy. There is suffering that fades away slowly as the person is practicing, attaining stream entry, once returner, never returner, and arahanthood. As the person progresses in spiritual development, his suffering goes down slowly. Then there is suffering that fades away quickly. The moment you attain full enlightenment, at that very moment, suffering disappears very quickly. And these are the four stages of diversity of suffering. Then what is the results of suffering? Here someone overcome by suffering with mind obsessed by it. Sorrow, languishes, laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and become confused, or else overcome by suffering with the mind obsessed by it. He embarks upon a search outside, saying, who knows one or two words for putting an end to this suffering? Suffering, I say, results either in confusion or in a search. This is called results of suffering. We think suffering is the result, but suffering itself has some other further results. These are the results that Buddha explained in here. When somebody loses his dearest person, dearest friends, parents, sometimes even the wealth. Wealth is somebody's dearest thing. I remember there was, some years ago, there was the stock market crashed. People who have borrowed maybe $1 million today, went to bed. When they got up next morning, now next morning they found that they owe $10 million. Today they borrowed $1 million, and tomorrow they have to pay back $10 million. Why is that? Market crashed, money devaluated, and therefore they had to pay the capital and interest and so forth. What happened? Some of them committed suicide because they cannot repay that much money to the bank. So they get confused. That's what Buddha said. They have suffering. In order to overcome suffering, they borrowed money and so forth and so on. As a result of that, and then next day they found they had to pay more. They borrowed money to overcome their suffering. I mean, paying bills and doing business better. So next day they found they are in deeper depths, and they got confused and died. Some people get confused when their dearest person, maybe a friend or relative or parents or somebody, they totally depend on them for everything in their life. Then they pass away, they don't know what to do, they get confused. And that is what Buddha mentioned. Yeah, he did not give example, but we can think of thousands of examples in our life. Or else, overcome by suffering, with the mind obsessed by it, he embarks upon search outside. Suffering arises inside, and they are looking for solution outside. You remember Dhamma, what do you call it? What is that? Dhamma Sonda? Dhamma Sonda? In English, Dhamma Sonda. Dhamma Sonda, king.
Yes.
Right? He was looking for Dhamma. He wanted to give up everything, even whole kingdom, for the sake of Dhamma. To hear somebody telling him one real Dhamma word, because his suffering was so much, he cannot handle it. In the hope of receiving some help, he even was ready to jump into the mouth of a devil. So a devil came and opened his mouth, and he was on the top of a hill, and he asked the devil, "Can you teach me Dhamma?" He said, "Yes, if you jump into my mouth, I will teach you Dhamma." This fool did not know that when he jumped into the devil's mouth, he can never live. But still he was so desperate to get rid of his suffering, he even was ready to jump in the mouth of a devil to listen to Dhamma, because suffering was so much. So I say result either in confusion or in a search. So the results of karma are two: either you get confused, or you search for results outside. That is the result. And what is the cessation of karma? Cessation of karma is cessation of craving, That is very famous. We all know that. And Buddha concluded, when Bhikkhu, a noble disciple, thus understands suffering, the source and origin of suffering, diversity of suffering, the results of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering, he understands this penetrative spiritual life to be the cessation of suffering. Penetrative spiritual life is the Noble Eightfold Path. And we all know Noble Eightfold Path. The beginning of Noble Eightfold Path is the understanding. What do we understand? We understand impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. This is understanding. For understanding Four Noble Truths, understanding Noble Eightfold Path, understanding impermanence, understanding unsatisfactoriness, and understanding selflessness. When we have this kind of understanding, that is number one on the Noble Eightfold Path. Everything follows understanding. Right speech, right intention, sankappa, vacha kammantadi, vayama sat samadhi, all follow from right understanding. Therefore, everything geared towards liberating ourselves from suffering. That is how Noble Eightfold Path becomes the path leading to the end of suffering. I think that may be enough. I don't give you any time to ask me questions, but that's all right. You have plenty of time to ask questions. This is enough for today. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu.